What is up? Welcome to my channel. My name is Branka and I'm glad you're here. Today we're going over the Justin Baldoni Blake Lively lawsuit yet again. The New York Times is one of the most widely read newspapers in the United States, and once upon a time served as a primary newspaper of record, publishing all the news that's fit into print. The Times was considered a paragon of journalistic integrity and excellence, the gold standard for journalism in the United States, and highly respected news outlet internationally. For generations, the paper's historical influence on the socio-political and cultural life of the country and its institutions could not be overstated. Americans long relied on the Times as a source of accurate and balanced news reporting. Viewpoint-based commentary was expressly excluded from news stories. Indeed, for years, Americans grew to expect that the Times would, as legendary Times executive editor A.M. Rosenthal said, tell it straight, or in other words, simply report the news without embellishing or driving it. For much of its storied history, whether it was the Civil Rights Movement, the Vietnam War, Watergate, or other political and cultural issues, through its objective, investigating reporting and the diverse viewpoints represented on OPED pages, the Times strove to inform America through high journalistic standards, accuracy, and fairness. The publication has won far more Pulitzer Prizes than any other media company in the U.S. history, with its first being awarded more than 100 years ago. But over the last 20 years, Times reporters have ever more frequently veered spectacularly from their own journalistic guidelines. As a result, it's become commonplace to find New York Times stories containing egregious factual errors or infected with bias. Such lapses have contributed to public destruction of the Times in a landscape where partisan actors can cry fake news with some justification. But the New York Times still wields a powerful and influential megaphone in the media and greater society. It is therefore under a solemn obligation to do the work necessary to get its reporting right. As reporters at the Times well know, getting it wrong can lead to disastrous outcomes for story subjects, including financial, professional, and reputational ruin. And New York Times sets the narrative and tone for other news organizations, amplifying the impact of its mistakes. The instant case is emblematic of the Times having lost its way, as the facts here make plain that the Times failed to follow its own journalistic standards, rushed to judgment, and with careless disregard, published a story accusing plaintiffs of waging a smear campaign against Lively, causing a feeding frenzy based on a demonstrably false premise. At 9:43 p.m. on December 20th, 2024, Hoover requested plaintiffs' response to its reporting regarding a crisis communication operation conducted on behalf of Justin Baldoni, Jamie Heath, and Wayfair Studios to protect their reputation and harm Blake Lively's, as described in a legal complaint filed today. Hoover wrote in part, "We are seeking a response to the claims of retaliation through this PR campaign, and we would welcome the opportunity to talk with you on record. Please offer any on-the-record comment, as well as any other information you think we should know. Additionally, please notify us of any inaccuracies. We need to hear back from you tomorrow by noon Eastern." At 2:16 a.m. Eastern, plaintiff's legal representation responded as follows. "It is shameful that Miss Lively and her representatives would make such a serious and categorically false accusation against Mr. Baldoni, Wayfair Studios, and its representatives, as yet another desperate attempt to fix her negative reputation which was garnered from her own remarks and actions during the campaign for the film. Interviewers and press activities that were observed publicly in real time and unedited, which allow for the internet to generate their own views and opinions. These claims are completely false, outrageous, and intentionally salacious, with an intent to publicly hurt and rehash a narrative in the media. Wayfair Studios made the decision to proactively hire a crisis manager prior to the marketing campaign of the film, to work alongside her own representative with Jones Work employed by Stephanie Jones, due to the multiple demands and threats made by Miss Lively during production, which included her threatening to not show up to set, threatening to not promote the film, ultimately leading to its demise during release. If her demands were not met, it is also discovered that Miss Lively enlisted her own representative, Leslie Salone with Vision PR, who also represents Mr. Reynolds, to plant negative and completely fabricated and false stories with the media, even prior to any marketing had commenced for the film, which was another reason why Wayfair Studios made the decision to hire a crisis professional to commence internal scenario planning in the case they needed to address. The representatives of Wayfair Studios still did nothing proactive nor retaliated, and only responded to incoming media inquiries to ensure balanced and factual reporting, and monitored social activity. What is pointedly missing from the cherry-picked correspondence is the evidence that there was no proactive measures taken with media or otherwise, just internal scenario planning and private correspondence to strategize, which is standard operating procedures with public relations professionals. At 10:11 a.m. on December 21st, 2024, The Times published the article, notwithstanding that The Times was made aware of egregiously defamatory allegations contained therein. It proceeded with publication without further inquiry. Indeed, in its rush to publish a one-sided, unsubstantiated story on behalf of Lively, The Times got it dramatically wrong. The aftershocks have been disastrous for plaintiffs, and they now, reluctantly, knowing the damage cannot be fully undone, bringing suit to hold The Times accountable for its egregious misfire. Causes of action. Plaintiffs incorporate by reference each and every allegation set forward in paragraphs 1 through. The article purported to detail a campaign allegedly orchestrated by plaintiffs to tarnish Lively. It did so chiefly through the selective disclosure of private communications allegedly exchanged between plaintiffs. Persons who read the article reasonably understood the references to Baldoni, Heath, and Swords, Abel, Nathan, and Wallace, and their respective companies to be referenced to plaintiffs herein. The article contains fabricated, false, and malicious and defamatory statements of fact concerning plaintiffs. The article is libelous on its face and exposes plaintiffs to hatred, contempt, ridicule, and causes plaintiffs to be shunned or avoided, and has a tendency to injure them in their occupation. Specifically, the article falsely attributes negative public sentiment towards Lively to a malicious, premeditated affirmation smear campaign orchestrated by plaintiffs, and not to Lively's long-standing reputational challenges and the whims of a fickle and sometimes cool online public. The article advances its false narrative by cherry-picking out of context, and in some cases doctored, private communications never intended for public disclosure or consumption to advance a highly inflammatory, one-sided narrative plainly designed to villainize plaintiffs, manufacture an impression of impropriety where none exists, and grossly exaggerated plaintiffs' control over online public opinion or the tone or tenor of press coverage, particularly with respect to an enormous, well-resourced A-list actress with her own pitbull press team. The article also falsely portrays plaintiffs as motivated to harm Miss Lively, as the unlawfully obtained communications demonstrate, however, that it is flatly false. Plaintiffs' motivations were defensive in nature and driven by valid concern that Lively's team had been seeding stories critical of Baldoni and Wayfair. The Times, without elaboration, dismisses this concern as baseless, treating plaintiffs' candid private discussions, which were never intended to see the light of day, as if it were a press release. In fact, as the Times should know from the voluminous confidential communications it apparently has obtained, plaintiffs' concerns were not baseless. Plaintiffs are informed and believe, and based thereon allege, that defendants, and each of them, portray plaintiffs in this manner, knowing that the portrayal was false or with reckless disregard for its truth or falsity. This is apparent because, per the article, the Times reviewed, among other documents, thousands of pages of text messages and email. Defendants, therefore, had access to documents and communications sufficient to refute its portrayal of plaintiffs. Totality of the communications obtained and reviewed by the Times, when not spliced dishonestly, cherry-picked, and stripped of critical context, refute the article's premise that plaintiffs were responsible for negative public sentiment towards Lively, and the implication throughout that plaintiffs were motivated to harm Lively and engage in unethical behavior to do so. Defendants knew that their portrayal of plaintiffs was false, incomplete and misleading, and highly inflammatory. The actual malice of defendants in each of them is evident that their deliberate decision to publish the article without having a. afforded plaintiffs a meaningful opportunity to respond, verified the authenticity, accuracy, and completeness of the communications relied upon, or ensured even a modicum of impartiality, skepticism, or even handedness when covering highly inflammatory allegations, as they know could destroy the reputation and careers of plaintiffs. As a direct and proximate result of above described by defendants, each of them plaintiffs have suffered general and special damages in an amount of not less than 250 million, including damage to plaintiffs' reputation and standing in the community, shame, mortification, hurt feelings, embarrassment, humiliation, damage to peace of mind, emotional distress, and injury to their occupations. Although the full nature, extent, and amount of these damages are currently unknown, this complaint will be amended at or before trial to insert such information if such amendment is deemed necessary by the court. Plaintiffs are informed and believe and based thereon allege that defendants in each of them depicted plaintiffs in a defamatory manner in conscious disregard of plaintiffs' legal rights. Plaintiffs are informed and believe, based on thereon allege, that defendants and each of them intend to injure plaintiffs by the defamatory statements in the article. Defendants conduct warrants an award of punitive and exemplary damage against each of the defendants. The second cause of action. Plaintiffs incorporate by reference each and every allegation set forward in paragraphs 1 through 133. And alleged herein, defendants in each of them publish false statements of and concerning plaintiffs, to the extent the trier of facts find that these statements are not defamatory. Plaintiffs are informed and believe, based thereon allege, that defendants, each of them, intended them to depict plaintiffs in a false, fictionalized, and sensational light in order to catalyze public opprobrium towards plaintiffs, stir public discussion of the article, and draw readers to the Times. The article, as noted above, falsely portrays negative public sentiment towards Lively as a result of a premeditated smear campaign orchestrated by plaintiffs, intentionally exaggerated plaintiffs' power to manipulate public sentiment, mischaracterizing plaintiffs' stated motivations, and cherry-picking out of context incomplete and sometimes doctored private communication as a result of these deliberate choices, which seemed transparently intended to elevate Lively and restore her reputation rather than accurately portray the events described therein. Millions of readers, as well as the broader public, were exposed to deeply misleading, unfair, and untrue picture of plaintiffs. Among other things, the article portrays plaintiffs as having waged an affirmation campaign to harm Lively through planted news stories and the exploitation of bots to shape social media discourse. In fact, an alleged herein and evident in the communications reviewed by the Times, plaintiffs' aims were purely defensive, not offensive, and they were themselves taken aback by the groundswell of the public support for Baldoni, which was organic. Notwithstanding the subscription throughout the article, plaintiffs do not control the viewpoints of the online public and were not motivated to harm Lively's reputation. They were concerned above all with the protection of Baldoni and Wayfair. The article therefore portrayed plaintiffs in a false light, and the false light created by the article is highly offensive to reasonable people in plaintiffs' position. Plaintiffs are informed and believe, based thereon allege, that defendants in each of them portrayed plaintiffs in a false light, knowing that the portrayal was false, or with reckless disregard for its truth or falsity. This is evident from defendants and each of their possession of private communications directly refuting and contradicting the portrayal of plaintiffs and the central premise of the article, namely that plaintiffs had orchestrated a smear campaign to harm Lively. In addition, defendants in each of them willfully refused to afford plaintiffs meaningful opportunity to respond to the allegations. Defendants contacted plaintiffs concerning the allegations the evening of Friday, December 20th, 2024, providing them until the following morning to respond to extensive, highly inflammatory allegations based on curiously obtained cherry-picked private communications of uncertain authenticity or accuracy. Thereafter, defendants in each of them published the article 2 hours before their stated deadline, cutting off plaintiffs' ability to respond before the inevitable reading frenzy began. As a direct and proximate result of the above-described conduct by defendants and each of them, plaintiffs have suffered general and special damages in the amount of not less than 250 million, including damage to plaintiff's reputation, standing in the community, shame, mortification. Is this the same thing? Okay, I think that's it. That is the entirety of the Variety article on the New York Times vs. Justin Baldoni lawsuit. So now we have one final lawsuit to get through, and we'll see what happens in that one. That is the big, I think it's 400 million lawsuit Justin Baldoni takes against Blake and Ryan Reynolds and her PR person. With that said, if you guys enjoyed this video, feel free to like and comment down below. If you didn't, feel free to leave a hate comment. I'd love to hear your opinion, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.